Hello, yes, it is me again. I know it's been a while, but today I wanted to make a video talking about probably one of the most famous franchises to ever exist, I guess. I don't know. That's total bullshit. Today we're talking about Spider-Man. So I grew up on Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I was like 8 when the movies originally came out, which makes me like the prime target audience for that like movie. So I remember them so fondly. I loved all 3 of the original Spider-Man. I saw them all in theaters. I was super into them. And then I literally never watched them again. Like I think I saw them in movie theaters and then I never rewatched any of the movies. And now that they are being repurposed, the characters, I decided that I would go ahead and rewatch all 3 movies and see if they still hold up. And trust me when I say that I am doing you guys a favor because, man, these movies have not aged well. They're not bad. I don't want to make them sound bad off the start. I do love these movies. These movies have a super strong nostalgia feel for me. But oh my god, dude, these movies are tough to get through. So let's start with the original Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 1. So one of the first things I really picked up on this movie is that all 3 main characters are complete like jerks. Like Peter is not really likable, MJ's kind of a hoe, and I shouldn't say that. Look, okay, MJ just kind of goes with whoever she feels like, and then Harry is just kind of like the rich jerk character. And they really don't have any likable characters. Another interesting thing is that, so this is all early into Tobey Maguire's career, into James Franco's career, and Kristen Dunst's career. And they were not great actors back then, especially James Franco. Because it's funny, now when I think of James Franco, I think, man, James Franco is a pretty solid actor. Like I wouldn't doubt him. But back then, dude, he was awful. And I promise I'll show you some amazing clips. So basically, the TLDR of this movie is it's kind of like the introduction movie to Spider-Man. Spider-Man gets bit by a basically radioactive spider or one with gene editing stuff in it, and he becomes Spider-Man. Meanwhile, like Norman Osborn, which is Harry's father, is basically getting screwed over because he's a scientist and like the government's cutting his funding or something. So instead of just being a scientist and moving to another corporation and still being rich out of your fucking mind, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna get revenge by potentially killing myself by becoming the Green Goblin. Well, I mean, not becoming the Green Goblin, but using the serum that turns him into the Green Goblin. And one of the best things about this movie, by far, is William Dafoe's performance as an actor. He kills the Green Goblin. I would go to say that William Dafoe is the best actor in the trilogy of the movies. I mean, he is just super strong in the first movie, and he does kind of have some scenes in the second and third one, but like not a ton. And the thing that really sucks about it is that William Dafoe is such a fantastic actor, and then he's put next to James Franco as Harry, who is just atrocious at this point in his career. And it really stands out. It's so obvious that James Franco is so uncomfortable in front of the camera, and he kept making mistakes, and it kept looking really bad. I mean, you can kind of write it off as teenage nervousness, and that's what I was trying to do, but it really did stick out like a sore thumb. But one of the things that has aged extremely well with this movie is the fight scenes. The fight scenes against the Green Goblin and Spider-Man are incredibly well choreographed. That and the CG is really good. It can be a bit corny sometimes, like for instance, the scene where they turn into skeletons and vanish. It is still really good. Like, I mean, that's intentional. I feel like those scenes are intentional, I should clarify. Overall, this movie definitely has the best villain in it. The Green Goblin is like a really likable villain. I mean, he is insane. He's got the poison in his mind, but he is still kind of this interesting character that kind of goes back and forth. He's nice, but like you can see him like his personality changing, and it's less so that he's being taken over by the Green Goblin serum, but more so that that's his real character, real personality. And I think that's really cool because it's not 2 separate entities. It is Norman Osborn's real self, and that's kind of cool because you get to see him push Spider-Man to the limit and be like, hey man, they're just gonna screw you over like they did with me once they're done using you, so don't be that way. And then he kills himself. I think the thing that pissed me off the most about this movie, the first movie at least, is the very contrived fight between Spider-Man and Harry. All that Spider-Man had to do is when he was dropping off the Green Goblin's or Norman's body in front of Harry, all he had to do was just be like, yo, I couldn't save him. Like, you're not even lying. Like, you did try to save Norman, because Norman's, not a terrible individual. I mean, he killed a lot of people, but that's besides the point. But like, you say that, Harry's like, oh my God, Spider-Man tried to save my father, but didn't do it. Oh no, what a tragedy. Boom. That like literally resolves the second and third movie's conflicts. I think what really made me appreciate this movie was the realization that this movie came out in 2002. Because it was very brave for its time. This is before Marvel was established. This was before The Dark Knight Rises came out, you know what I mean? So these movies were serious, but also still had some of the leftover comedy, corny comedy of the like 90s and 80s Batman movies, where they did make jokes, they did make kind of funny moments happen. But in reality, it was a very serious movie. They tried their best, and I feel like they were very successful. They got a good point across about how betrayal works and how with great power comes great responsibility. I know it's a meme, but it's kind of true, and that's the point of this movie. Frankly, that's the point of the trilogy, is that, Parker has to come through and has to be like, I've got these crazy powers. I can use them for selfish reasons and be like the Green Goblin, or I can just live in poverty and then actually save people's lives and make a difference. So let's go ahead and move on to the second movie. And before we start, I feel like I forgot to mention her, but Rosemary Harris, the lady who plays Aunt May, is a phenomenal actress. I feel like she doesn't have very many scenes, but in the second movie in particular, she has quite a few really powerful scenes where you get to see her like put on her acting chops, and dude, she kills it. I mean, and it sucks because she's always catty-cornered to Peter Parker, and Peter, or Tobey Maguire, really doesn't do a fantastic job into her. And this is when they're adults now, so you can't even be like, oh, well, they're just teenage kids. They're just awkward and weird. Like, no, they're young adults. Like, Peter has a job, or trying to have a job. Like, they should be a little bit more normal to speak to, but it's not. So in this movie, Harry takes over the Osborn Corporation and brings in Dr. Octavius, who is instantly like the most likable character you could possibly imagine. Dr. Octavius as an individual is fantastic, because literally the first scene with Dr. Octavius and Peter, Dr. Octavius sits Peter down for some tea and then just talks mad shit to him the entire time. He's like, kid, you need to get your act together. You gotta find the woman you love. You gotta propose. You gotta be a scientist. You gotta work hard. He's like, I can tell you're talented. I mean, he's just an inspirational speaker. He's such a likable character. My only problem with Dr. Octavius is that he is a fantastic character, but a terrible villain. He is the epitome of, oh, I only need 1 degree of safety for everything I do. Like, he makes AI claws that can control his brain, attaches them to his body, and the only thing protecting him is an inhibitor chip. That, what if someone throws a rock at that? Do you just become like an evil machine? Did you seriously think only 1 layer of security was okay for that? Like, it's just kind of one of those things where, his villain origin is very contrived, because Dr. Octavius is not evil. He's a very good guy. I mean, you see, when he walks down to the docks after the accident, he's like, all right. He immediately goes, well, I need to kill myself because I can't get rid of these claws. They'll kill more people. If I kill myself, they can't hurt anybody. And then obviously the claws just take over his body, basically. And they try to make it sound like, oh, he's kind of turned evil and controlled, but the finale of the entire movie shows that that's not the case, because he gets control back and he immediately kills himself, basically. So I really want to bring attention to something really cool about this movie. So the action scenes are fantastic in this movie, just like all the other movies of the Spider-Man franchise, but the CGI is truly phenomenal. You gotta remember, this movie came out in 2004, 16 years ago, and look at this CGI. This is 2004 fluid CGI of a man like in a suit on a train. Like, how does that look that realistic? That is incredible. That is nutty. Like, that is some super high-tech CGI. This is passable for modern standards. Like, if I saw that in like a regular budget movie, I would not blink an eye. That came out today, and this shit came out 16 years ago. So the CGI in these movies are fantastic. The third one, you can tell, especially when they try to do some like the particle physics stuff, that it's not as great. But in this movie, you can really see how much work they put into the CGI and how much work they put into some of the set designs. This scene right here is actually my favorite because this is a real set. This is all built. These giant claws look amazing. I love how the claws look. I know they're evil, but God, they're so cool looking. And I think that's half the sell of this movie. I do think one of my main complaints is that there were like a lot of really small, weird, I would almost want to call them mistakes, but like problems with this movie that I had. I think my big one is the random Jesus imagery that kind of comes through. Like, there's no religious imagery at all in this show, but then they just get really heavy-handed with it for some reason. Also, why does this bank have gold coins just lying around? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, and if you're wondering, when I say that James Franco is just a terrible actor in these movies. Like I said, I love James Franco. He's a fantastic actor now, but so this is a perfect example of what I mean when James Franco has come a long way as an actor, because in this scene, so what they do is they just have like claws that are like that, you know, PAs are holding, and they just slam against the person, and he's supposed to jump back. But he waits there like half a second, so it's so awkward looking because you could see the claw hit his shirt, and he's like, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to jump back. Oh, it's so bad. There's also a bunch of other weird like problems with this movie that the first movie didn't really have. I think my favorite is that you see Spider-Man standing on top of this crane, and then he shoots a spider web up into the atmosphere, and I guess he hangs onto the moon as he pulls himself up. There's like just a lot of little mistakes in this movie. But like I said, overall, this movie is still pretty good. Dr. Octavius is definitely one of my favorite characters, but I would still make the argument that as a villain, he's just not very good. This third movie, I have to admit, is by far the worst out of the trilogy. It's an hour and a half of setup and 30 minutes of like okay fight scenes, but not terribly great choreographed fight scenes. I just feel like this movie just really doesn't stand out, and it's by far the hardest to get through because there's that whole weird, like, you know, Peter's into jazz and he's emo phase of the movie that I knew was supposed to be funny. I knew it was happening. I knew it was gonna come, and so I was like happy and looking forward to it. But it drags on for a bit. It's longer than you realize. It is painful to get through. Basically, the TLDR of this movie is Harry finally figures out that Peter is Spider-Man, and Harry turns himself into the Green Goblin, which is interesting because Harry takes the medicine or the whatever that weird gas stuff is to become the Green Goblin, right? But he doesn't have any of the side effects, which means that Norman Osborn's invention works, which means that if he just took some time to invest and work out the bugs, he could actually make like a really great super soldier weapon, but instead he just uses it to get revenge on Spider-Man, which frankly I guess is in character for Harry because Harry's a complete fucking moron. This movie does like a full hour of backstory. Like there's a bunch of weird contrived fights. Like for instance, like Peter thinks, oh, I'm gonna ask my girlfriend to become my wife, but I'm gonna make out with this random chick right in front of her right before I do that. Like I know Peter's an idiot, but come on, like that's a bit much. There's also my favorite line where Aunt May says,
Spider-Man doesn't kill people.
Which is pretty great because so far every villain that has fought against Spider-Man has died. So the TLDR of this movie is that Spider-Man gets taken over by Venom, and so he gets to be Venom for a while and have fun and like have super cool with the black spider suit and stuff like that. But then he realizes it's not good for him, so he rips it off, and the real Venom is born by some guy that Peter accidentally ruined the life of. Well, not accidentally, he definitely did it on purpose, but he ruined the life of some guy, so I kind of get why he wanted to kill Peter. And then there is Sandman, who is the person who actually killed Uncle Ben. The final fight scene is Venom and Sandman work together to try to kill Peter Parker, which is weird because Sandman doesn't really have anything against Spider-Man or Peter Parker. He's just kind of like trying to save his kid. He's like, yeah, let's Spider-Man came and stopped me twice and didn't really do anything. So yeah, let's work together and kill him for some reason. Like that, it's so out of character, and his whole arc doesn't make sense. I think Sandman, in my opinion, is the worst villain in the entire trilogy because, I mean, he has some character development and he's supposed to be likable, but he just doesn't have enough screen time. They're trying to do too many things with this final movie. Same thing with Venom, the guy who is Venom. We get a few scenes with him, but he's so unlikable because all he does is scummy shit the entire movie. And so when he becomes Venom and he gets killed, like, there's just no care in the world. It's just kind of like, all right, whatever. And then obviously Sandman doesn't get killed by Peter because Peter forgives him. And that's the only villain that ever lived. I mean, even Harry dies, and Harry changed sides, but since Harry fought him once, he has to die. But yeah, I mean, overall, the third movie was by far the worst. The third movie was really the one that took the most time to get through. I had to take multiple breaks, especially during the weird emo phase of Spider-Man. That shit aged so poorly. It was terrible. Overall, the trilogy was probably a little better than what I remembered it. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. The first movie, I would have to give like an 8 out of 10, the second like a 7 out of 10, and then the third a 5 out of 10. So by far my favorite movie has to be the first movie, because I mean, you have William Dafoe in there, and like I said, he kills it as the Green Goblin. I feel like everyone kind of already agrees with me on that. William Dafoe is fantastic as the Green Goblin. Not to mention, the Green Goblin is by far the best villain out of the trilogy, in my opinion, because he has like a pretty unique backstory. He's got interesting kind of split personality, and he actually has development as a character throughout the entire movie. Another good thing is that you can also write off Tobey Maguire, James Franco, Kirsten Dunst, like bad acting as awkward teenage years, which helps a little bit because you're like, okay, maybe they're just weird until they become adults and they kind of act the same way. Except I have to admit, Kirsten Dunst in the second movie is much stronger. It's clear that she really tried in the second and third movies, and she kind of cleaned up her act a little bit. But Tobey Maguire and James Franco just really didn't do it for me as actors. Just seemed so awkward. I don't know what to say. And it's great because I feel like Aunt May, Rosemary Harris, is by far one of the most slept on characters in this entire like trilogy. She is fantastic. She has so many good scenes, and frankly, she carries a lot of the movies when William Dafoe isn't around. My final point is that the CGI in these movies were fantastic for their time. Like I said, they're still passable for today. Like if I saw CGI from these movies in today's movies, I wouldn't really bat an eye. I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty standard. And these are movies that came out 14 to 18 years ago. Basically back when computers definitely weren't built for making CGI. Now, would I recommend you guys rewatch Spider-Man? I would say maybe rewatch the first one, and if you're super into Spider-Man, rewatch the second one. And then if you need to rewatch the third one, watch it with some friends because it is just very hard to get through if you're not laughing at it the entire time. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys around. Peace.